Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lynn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lynn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lynn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today, listeners, I've got a very special guest. Her name is Suzy Miller. She's a divorce strategist. And today we're going to be discussing how to have a peaceful divorce by recognizing the impact of conflict in divorce. So, Suzy, how do we recognize the impact we have in divorce?
One of the things I tackle with the most is people's misconception that divorce itself has to be this conflict-ridden experience. So what I tend to ask people is, what are the effects of the conflicts that you currently have in this situation, or that you fear you will have, to help them become aware of what are very extreme outcomes that they're often not aware of in the beginning. And it's not that I'm trying to frighten people off having conflict and say they should have these kind of peaceful, fluffy divorces. It's just more pragmatic than that. I think people do need to recognise that their attitude, how they go into this process and how they react to the other person in this process is what will determine the outcomes for them, which can be pretty extreme.
Yeah, they can. And so could you give us a sort of case study or an example of how this has played out with the clients that you've worked with, and how subsequently how you help them navigate, through that?
So happily. So I'll pull out some examples of people I've been chatting to in the last few weeks. For example, talking to a lady where they started off really friendly and they wanted everything good. They were put off by the initial costs, the finances, talked to solicitors. Anyway, to cut a long story short, they were talking to me because it was all starting to go all wonky, and it had become the conflict had come in around the finances, because once you start talking about the money, everything can change. And I said to them, so this kind of peaceful, lawyers around the table divorce so far, how much does it cost you? Bearing in mind all they've done is put the petition in. They hadn't actually sorted out any of the finances. And she said, it's cost me so far £20,000, and probably about the same for my husband.
Ouch.
Yes, exactly. And we had a sort of a dry laugh about it, because they'd originally avoided mediation because they thought it was going to be too expensive. Because it was only going to cost them potentially £2,000, which actually, as it was, doesn't have to cost you that much. But so people can start off peacefully, but very soon conflict comes in around the money. And just in the admin side, in the choices they make, who they put their trust in, the way they do the process can have massive financial consequences. That's even before you're talking about going to court and fighting. So I've literally got on video a lawyer who says, I said to her, what can be the cost going to court? And she said, you might as well take £50,000, put it in a suitcase and throw it on the fire. Yeah, she's a lawyer. That's not me saying that. That's the lawyer. And so it is. So the conflict around finances is something people, if they've got any assets, they need to take very, very seriously. And anyone obviously listening to this podcast who comes via you can have a free what I call a divorce navigation session to just highlight, these are the areas, this is where it can go wrong, and but actually these things are so avoidable, but people just don't know. They don't have that information up front. And the other area of conflict, of course, is huge. That's often huge, is around the children, the co-parenting. Of course, when that gets out of hand, who suffers? But the children. That's the next generation. The next generation unable to form healthy relationships because their role models have been possibly years of either overt or passive aggressive anger between the two people who are supposed to be showing them how to have healthy relationships. So, for example, I always work off the basis, and this comes from my own experience as well, there's no such thing as a broken family. There's only an extended family. So it's our role as parents, even if the other person is being very, very difficult, and we all seem to be surrounded by narcissists at the moment, but whatever you might think of your ex or ex-to-be, the way you handle the situation with the children has massive impacts, not just on your children, but on yourself, because you don't want to carry that guilt into the rest of your life of having messed it all up, and has a massive impact on society as a whole, because literally we're putting generations of children into the world who grow up to have very dysfunctional relationships. And again, I run regular divorce financial workshops online, and I had and also my divorce TV show every week, and I had a lovely psychotherapist there, Karen Baru, and she, in her interview, was talking about these number of clients she gets who are in their sort of 30s, 40s, failed marriages, failed relationships, and it all goes back to them learning about relationships from their terrible, disastrous divorces of their parents.
Yeah, I can vouch for that myself. I've been through that. Yeah. And also I can vouch for, the expense that engaging lawyers and solicitors can get astronomically out of control. It's like once you've engaged a solicitor, you might as well, write a blank check, because I do think they have their part to play in sometimes very much posing questions unnecessarily and seeing things that aren't necessarily an issue and making that a bigger issue, or making it, drawing it to your attention when it doesn't need to be drawn to your attention in order to extend things. I really do, and then justify their extra expense on the back of that.
And that's a very understandable perception, and definitely that can happen. But in reality, I guess a lot of what I'm doing is helping people take responsibility for the process. So, for example, if you've got some plumbing to do, you're not going to get in an electrician, are you?
No.
You'd think that was crazy. And yet people will use the solicitors to do divorce admin, which is a very expensive way to do it. There's lots of cheaper ways to do that you can do it, which I'm happy to point people in the direction of. They use their solicitors as therapists by spending hours, by paying the money, talking about their ex, and that's not the training and role of a lawyer. And they also often think that the lawyers are their financial experts, but they're not. They're not trained financial planners who do long-term cash flow forecasting, which is what I would introduce people to if they've got any assets that need splitting. So people literally see the legal profession have put themselves as the gatekeepers to divorce, and I don't personally believe they're the right people to be there, because actually there's very little law in family law. They are very, very useful, but for certain areas and at certain points. So it's a bit like, I guess, like I'm an architect in divorce, so I can tell you where you need the plumber, the electrician, the different people to come in, what you need them to do, what do you need them to actually do for you, because that massively reduces the cost, and also reduces the conflict, because conflict comes out of fear and confusion and all the emotions. So if you can deal with that up front before you even start doing the actual divorce admin, you're going to have a much better outcome, and you're going to have a much less stressful approach. So it's a very holistic approach. So, for example, with the divorce financial workshop coming up in September, we've got not just a collaborative lawyer. Most people have never heard of collaborative law, and there are lawyers who will say they're collaborative, but it is actually a very special training, and you don't go to court if you use a collaborative lawyer. So they'll find out about that and be able to speak to her. She's what I call the right kind of lawyer. And we've got another lawyer who's there about wills and trusts, which again, people don't think about that quite often when they're getting divorced. But do you really want to, if you happen to fall under a bus, do you want your ex and their new boyfriend or girlfriend to get everything go to them, and most people would go no. So you need to look at your will. So right through to a healing, tapping, emotional freedom technique, because these healing techniques can be fantastic tools for keeping people calm, keeping them centered so they make better decisions. Also very useful for the children. We've got a divorce coach who works with transitions, people moving from one area to the life to the other. And when you work with someone like her, you're going to make much more sensible decisions about your future. So then the discussions you have with the financial planner, where you're not looking just at the divorce now, it's a bit like having a baby. Don't look at the now, look at the next 20, 30 years and base your settlement on that. Have long-term thinking.
Yes.
Because Kirsty Cox, who's going to be the financial planner at the next workshop, she tells a story of a lady that she worked with. Unfortunately, she got to work with her a bit too late along in the process, as not too late, but later than she would have liked to. And this lady had got the house in the divorce settlement. She was felt such a victory, but she had to downsize not once but twice within a year because she couldn't actually afford the house. She couldn't afford to run it. She couldn't afford the mortgage. So nobody'd run the numbers. So a lot of what I'm doing is just helping people to get out of the emotional state and not put it in the corner, deal with it, because it's vital, because that's what will feed the anger, and fear will feed the conflict. So they need to get control of that, but at the same time to just get basic sensible information that allows them to make informed choices, and know that they can do this themselves with the support of the right professionals and not on their own. But I think really interesting thing I want to share with you. Actually, I was interviewing a mediator recently, and I said to her, why do you think people are sort of resistant to do something that's so sensible and so much cheaper and so much quicker? Why would you not want to use mediation? And she said, you know what it is? I think it's that people are frightened. They think, how can we together sort this out? We've not managed to make our marriage work, which they see as a failure, which is a shame, because that's not a helpful way to see it. I see it as a transition. Who says we should be the rest of our lives with somebody? We change, things happen, we need to lose our judgments around that. But what matters is that we stay a family in whatever form. But she said, I think they feel that they can't take control of it. They don't have the skills. They don't have the confidence to believe that they can sort this out. And that's a tragedy, because we all have the ability to do that, providing we come at it, prepare properly. Don't just waltz into mediation and expect it to work. You kind of need to have a bit of a boot camp, I would call it, in how to make dispute resolution, make peace work for you. And that's partly mindset, partly practical information, and very much about connecting with a team of experts that you may or may not need all of them, but they're there if you need them.
Yeah, and I actually sort of like the analogy of you sort of referring back to the electrician and, coming to fix your plumbing, and that, like you say, having that right team, those tradespeople in the right areas that are going to be able to support the process.
Yeah, and I always say to people, it's not rocket science, and you don't need to be afraid of it. It's just no one's really explained it to them. So what's interesting when I do these divorce financial workshops, which are sponsored by what I call the right kind of law firms who are genuinely interested in encouraging people to stay out of court, I start them with a kind of idiot's dummy's guide to divorce and how the process works. And you would think, well, why would someone who's not a trained mediator, not a lawyer, be doing that bit? But that's because I can do it in plain English, so people get it, and it's like, oh, is that how it works? And I cannot tell you how many people have been for their sort of free citizens advice legal chat, and they have no idea what's going on at all. So that's one of the reasons I do what I do, because I realise somebody needs to just go, this is how it is. And some lawyers are much better at explaining it, but they don't have time to do free sessions and to put in that. It's hard. It's more challenging for them. They're part of a firm, a business. I also run a business, but I do put in a lot of free time. I give free navigation calls to people who come via referrals or who come through my divorce financial through my Best Way to Divorce Facebook group, for example. They can't just get it off the website, because that would be ridiculous. I'd have no time to do anything. But I do set a certain amount of time each week to give free guidance, because you're so confused. How can you know where to turn or what to do unless somebody just goes, this is the landscape, this is what you're entering into, this is what you need to watch out for, here's some good ideas that are suitable for you. And a lot of the resources I point people to are free resources, because I don't think you should pay to find out what you need. That just doesn't seem right to me. Pay for the service you need. Once you understand it and go, this is what I need now, most people are happy to pay for that because they know the value. But to charge them a load of money just to tell them a load of information and they're still confused, I don't think is right at all.
I love what you're doing, Suze. That's brilliant. You know, the fact that you can sort of, I suppose, give people the information they need in layman's terms without bogging them down with too much jargon around the legals is fabulous. And the fact that you can, like you say, let them know what they need for free without them having to think, oh my God, you know, how much is it going to cost me to even find out what I do need?
Yeah, exactly. And because often those are often very false economies, like the couple who avoided the mediation because they didn't want to commit to a couple of grand, and then, you know, over 20 grand later realizing it wasn't working out very well. But I think one of the things I'm very keen to get across to people is that, you know, peace, as I said in my TEDx in December 2019, peace isn't fluffy. Peace is about vision and courage and putting in boundaries. And very much I coming from a place that you do need to be able to have the information up front and may have a vision for the future. So a lot of the time, you know, I've been there, you get caught up in the pain and the misery and the anger and the rage, and you don't put your children first at that point. You don't put anyone first. You just become a sort of massive destructiveness, and getting out of that space and thinking differently and seeing things more truthfully actually is a vital part of the process. So before people start having in-depth discussions with financial experts or talking to lawyers, I'm more likely to be encouraging them to connect with coaching, maybe parenting experts and healers, because I think healing is very, very important. This is something I learned, because one of the other things I've noticed through conflict, going back to what we were talking about with conflict, is the result of conflict is very often, and I had a lady just this week, the same issue, it's not just it was mental health. She was worried about her mental health. She was starting to forget things, and this is not unusual. There's a lovely shared story on my last divorce TV show where the lady there, Rara, said, I just couldn't remember anything. And she realised later this is a result of the trauma, because it is so traumatic for many people, that even the thought of going through that, and they may be in quite a traumatic situation within their marriage, they may be various forms of abuse going on, and it does affect your mental health. And so this lady I spoke to realised, you know, she needed to move things forward. She didn't want to get a divorce, but she knew that she had to, for the sake of her mental health and her physical health, because she was on, the doctors were putting her on pills for raised blood pressure, which was a direct result of the massive amount of stress she's under. Wow. So, you know, and I think people need to be very honest with, you know, how the situation they're in, how it's affecting them, and they need to to have a bit of self-love and look at what needs to be done. And sometimes divorce might be part of that. Sometimes people don't actually need to divorce. They need more financial independence. Sometimes a really good post-nup will help a spouse who's worried about the other one spending all their money on gambling debts, for example. Addictions are also another big issue in many relationships. They may want to keep the relationship, but they don't want to end up like penniless in the process. So there's other, you know, divorce isn't always the only option, but it is just one of them. But again, I make sure people are able to make a proper decision on what's going to work for them, and then get access not just for themselves. So I always say to people, everything I'm telling you, all these strategies, these ways of doing these things, actually are to the benefit of your spouse as well. They won't say thank you. They won't understand that you're doing this, but everything we're talking about will help them too, because they don't need to spend thousands either. They don't need to have time off work and the stress of court when it's just not necessary. There's so many other ways, not just mediation, other ways to do this. And if you understand those and you start to be more in control of this process, and I often say, is your spouse, are they stupid? And they're like, well, no, they're not stupid. I said, good, because if you keep telling them sensible things, you've done the research, you now know things right now from our short conversation that they don't know, and their solicitor isn't really telling them, then this changes the whole dynamics of how you're going to be able to take this through. And you don't have to be friends with your spouse for this to work. You just need a common goal, and normally that common goal is the children.
Yeah, or to save money.
Absolutely. Yes. But actually, funnily enough, yes, it is. But often again, it's if it's more of an incentive when you think, well, that money we've just wasted on legal fees and we still haven't actually got our divorce sorted yet. God, that's the university fees. So that's gone now. We'll never get it back. So children are very useful because they help us to make that extra effort. Unfortunately, for a lot of people who don't have children, and obviously this is very big generalization, but it's much easier just to turn away and never have anything to do with them. So there's very incentive to have an ongoing relationship. So it's easier to just be angry and get consumed with it all. Whereas if you've got children, you've still got to co-parent with them maybe for 20 years. And so there is more of an incentive to use this experience as a massive growing opportunity, because that's what it is. I mean, it changed my life. I'm a much better person than I would have been if I hadn't been through it. And I'm not saying it was fun, and learning can be painful, but it gave me the opportunity to grow up, quite frankly, in a way that I had never needed to before. So, and that's obviously an ongoing process, by no means at the pinnacle of that yet, but it is a very amazing life experience to go through this kind of a transition. It's not just the ending of a contract. It's a re-evaluation of who you are, what you want out of life, what matters to you. It's an amazing opportunity to reflect on life that you probably haven't had time to do if ever, and nobody's ever asked you these things before. So I often see people blossom, not because they're freed from the other person, but because they've gone through this amazing process where they've reassessed their lives, got more in touch with why they're here, what they want to do, and then they're off like a rocket. And it would be nice to think if both sides did that, and unfortunately sometimes it is just one person takes the learning and the other one might say stuck, but the opportunity is there for everybody.
So do you think the people that offer advice, say through Citizens Advice, for example, where most people want to get that free initial consultation, maybe those Citizens Advice people need to be better educated, or be given leaflets around people's options that they could give them around, highlighting these alternative services.
I couldn't agree more. And it's all everything's so systemized. So for me I'd love to offer some time at Citizens Advice, but because I don't fit into this little system that's set up, and there's two examples I want to share. One, there's a lovely lady at Croydon Citizens Advice I spoke to a while back, and we were talking about divorce, and I said to her, that's right, somebody contacted them and got this information. I thought, this is a bit odd, so I phoned them up and I said, it's amazing how many people don't realise they can still get legal aid for mediation. And the lady at Citizens Advice went, can they? Didn't know. She didn't know. I said, yes, they can. And then there's a local Citizens Advice where there's a solicitor. I don't know if he still does it, but he's a very nice man, and he's a divorce solicitor. He doesn't do any form of dispute resolution, and if you go to Citizens Advice, you can get a free session with him. And he openly says to people, and he said it to me, oh, mediation, complete waste of time.
Wow.
So you Yeah, I've had some very bad stories of people who got their free session with a lawyer because that was, it's all about the business model. So, for example, I don't gain anything if everything goes to pieces and goes to court and again, I don't benefit financially from that model. So, but unfortunately, a lot of people do, and even in I'm always gathering really good experts onto my alternative divorce directory, and I've got some lovely divorce coaches there who are very much, we're all on the same page, right? But I know there are other divorce coaches who, most of their referrals come from Rottweiler solicitors. So it's a good, and those people have got money, they can pay, and they're traumatized with these horrible divorces. And of course, the divorce coach is there to help support them through. That divorce coach has got no incentive to turn around and go, why are you doing it this way? For goodness sakes, let's talk about it doing it a different way. So what I'm doing is quite unique, and I specifically set this up so that I don't that I can keep it that way, if you like, because the existing system is not full of bad people, but they're in a system where ultimately they get more money if there's a shitstorm, and that's a shame.
It is. It's terrible, really, because unfortunately, like you say, there is this Rottweiler system in place where everybody's, benefiting from, whatever money is available that can be gleaned from these poor people that are going through already a traumatic situation, and these people aren't necessarily aware of this alternative approach, which obviously is going to cost a little bit to get the right sorts of advice that they might need, but nowhere near the costs that could be involved in the other side of the greed and the Rottweiler fraternity.
I worked it out once, and I took the average divorce for the UK, and that's before going just without it becoming really, really bad, but using the sort of traditional method, the lawyers' letters backwards and forwards, you're paying every time. So this is without it becoming completely apocalyptic, but nonetheless, it was quite a large amount of money that people were spending. And then if they used dispute resolution, something like mediation, and that's where they'd have a few sessions, they'd perhaps do some work with a financial planner, which is a very good idea to do before you do that. Maybe they talk to a divorce coach. And I worked out that it's very easy to save at least £65,000 just by doing it the more sort of collaborative self-managed way, and you're self-managed, but you're still using all these professionals. So I see using a mediator still part of you self-managing your own divorce, but you just need to use them at the right point. Going to mediation before you've sorted out, worked with a financial planner if you've got assets is bonkers, because you're just spending money and then you have to go away and get more information. You haven't got anything to actually mediate because you're cutting a deal. So I just come at it from a very sort of pragmatic approach, and just to get rid of all the smoke and mirrors, and it is a lot of the things people spend the money on are things that actually may not, or they contribute to less conflict in the divorce, but they also contribute to the rest of their life. So if you work with a financial planner, you can then go on after the divorce and create a plan for the rest of your life, so when you can retire, you do all the stuff actually we should all do anyway. And you just take this opportunity, like we take the opportunity to get a proper will in place, for example, that we haven't bothered, even though we've got 3 children. I had 3 children and no will. It was only after I was single that a friend said, you need to get a will, Suzy. What happens if something happened to you? And I thought, oh my God, she's right. So a lot of the things that you invest in are really useful things that you want to do anyway, if you see what I mean. But they're all really it's a particularly good time to do it when you're getting a divorce, because they have a positive impact, actually reducing the conflict. Conflict comes, I believe, from fear and a lack of information. So if you take away the fear, you give people the information. Most people want a peaceful life. They don't want it to be difficult. Not really.
I 100% agree, Suzy, and I love, the more heart-centered. Let us make this an easy and as much as possible amicable process. From that client-focused customer service approach, rather than let's see, how much we can take from you in terms of the finances.
Absolutely. And there's a really good shift at the moment, because it's taken me a long time to find a way to work with law firms, because now they sponsor the divorce financial workshops, which we run online. It's very accessible to people online. I'm going to keep them online, and these are law firms who genuinely want people to stay out of court. And a conversation with one of the first firms that sponsored these, I said, do you realise I'm sending people away from you during the workshop? And only suggesting they use you for the bits that you're really good at, like doing the consent order at the end, and once they've cut a deal with a mediator. And the answer was no, I don't want them to go to court. It's a lot of time and hassle for us. And so as a business model for the law firms, they're starting to realise if they have more peaceful divorces going through, that they get less money for them, but they take less time. So if they can do more of them, they're still going to make perfectly good income from it. And that's a relief that's starting to filter through as they become more business minded, actually, because it's a myth, this idea that just unless you've got very, very rich clients, for the average person, that law firm is going to spend a lot of hours and time and hassle. And sometimes trauma for the lawyer. It's horrible what they have to witness sometimes. And more and more of them are training in dispute resolution and collaborative law, because they don't really want it to be horrible. So it's great that that's starting to happen, and I'm linking up with those law firms and helping them really get their message out there of dispute resolution.
Brilliant. I love the ethical approach to that, and the fact that the lawyers can see that actually it's not going to detract from what income they can make from their business, but to be more client focused and minimize their time that they're investing in going along an alternative route.
Absolutely. And what do you think, in your experience of people who are going through divorce, what do you think is the biggest sort of cause of conflict that you've seen?
I think it does come down to the finances usually, as to how that's going to be resolved if you've got assets, and how that's going to be split up between you. That was the case for me anyway, that caused a bit of angst. I initially was going to walk away with nothing other than the car, and we got quite a lot of assets between us, but I was convinced by my family, and by then I'd met a new partner once the divorce proceedings were going through, that the solicitor herself, that I deserved something from the marriage after 23 years. And obviously I did, but that caused a lot more angst at that point than obviously initially when I walked away and said, you can have everything.
And what I find is there's two things around that. One is that you've got one of the roles of the family court and the judges are to look at those financial settlements and make sure they're fair. They're like a backstop. So if you just like, oh no, I just want out of this, I don't want anything, they would be like, well, why? That's not realistic. Why are you doing that? Which is a good thing, and I think a lot of people don't realise that. So it's important to have. I'm not anti-court. It's just letting the court do the job it's supposed to do, which is not help families make a decision around their finances. That bit, they just shouldn't have to be interfering and having to make that decision for you. So if you think about it, the minute you give that power to the court to say to them, right, you're going to have to tell us what the financial split is because we just can't work it out together, you're handing over a vital part of your life and power to a bunch of people who don't even know you. It's bonkers if you stop to think about it. It's a desperate act when there are other ways. You've got arbitration, you've got collaborative law, you've got different types of mediation. There's so many tools in the peace toolbox that you can use to avoid that situation. So that is like last resort. Unfortunately, a lot of people just don't realise that. And the other thing, I think the common mistake is with assets is they think the lawyers are financial experts, and some of them will have expertise in financial matters when it comes to arguing in court, but they are not financial planners who do long-term cash flow forecasting, and those are the people you should be talking to. And not all of them will work with people right at the beginning of a divorce process, but I've managed to find them and continue to find them and work with them, and we are always evolving together how best to serve people right at the early stages so that they have they can come up with their own settlement of how this should be, have different options, and have an intelligent discussion about it. Sometimes just working with a financial planner does that. They don't even need the mediation, because they've got the facts there, and and there's only so much money. I mean, how many ways can you split it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And if they have a problem, quite often it's an emotional cause, like wanting to hang on to the house or whatever. So you can come up with different strategies, and the mediator's there to help hold that space and have that discussion if the relationship is broken down, if the trust is broken down at that point. That model is a good model. But you do need to put the work in first, have the preparation. So that's why I always introduce people for no obligation, no cost conversations with the right type of financial planners, and most, I would say 99% of those people don't even know those professions actually exist. They just think of financial advisors doing insurances and stuff. It's not the same at all. And they believe that that's what the lawyers can do, because that's what some of the lawyers make them think.
That's absolutely spot on. I love what you're doing, Suzy, and this alternative approach, that's very, as I say, very much, serving the client. I really do. So on that note, what would be the best contact information that you could offer our audience should they want to follow up on the back of this conversation?
If they're looking to access free resource, I've got online resources, free divorce forms, right through to the Best Way to Divorce Facebook group. Just go to bestwaytodivorce.co.uk.
Oh, that's great. I love that. That's very easy.
Yeah, it's nice and simple. I was very happy when that URL was like it was waiting for me.
Yeah.
bestwaytodivorce.co.uk. And if they go in there, they're linked to all the different things, divorce TV show, everything I'm up to, you can see on there. And then if anyone wants to have a navigation call with me, if you join the Facebook group or contact me through the site and say, you heard this podcast, they can definitely have a free navigation call. Or they may have someone they know and care about who they want. I often get referrals that way. It's not them, it's someone they know who really needs help, and they're in agony watching it all fall apart and just want them to head off in the right direction. So yeah, that's the way to do it. bestwaytodivorce.co.uk, and then my contact details are on there, and they can contact me direct as well from there.
Brilliant. Absolutely love it. And I've really loved this conversation as well, Suzy. So thank you so much for sharing your alternative methods and ways, and inspiring our audience to know that there is other options on the table if you're facing this situation at the minute. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
And on that note, listeners, it just leaves me to say that true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lynn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lynn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lynn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.